Have you ever considered what a huge role your personal background plays in the way you deal with money? Of course, it takes years of tries and errors, gains and losses to figure out one's financial skills. But what if now that you're more than 20 by a bit or by a lot, but still some of your deep-seated inherited mindsets related to money are affecting you more than you might think? In this video, I'll share with you my personal 5 worst money habits that root in my Soviet and post-Soviet upbringing, and discovering which was very eye-opening. Those can seem very controversial, and I still don't understand how they happen to coexist, but they do, and it takes a lot of mental effort to process and transform them. I will be very interested to hear what you have to say, whether those habits and mindsets are familiar to you and your culture. I know that there are people from many various backgrounds here, and please keep in mind that here I voice only my personal opinion, my experience, and share some quite sensitive stories and realizations. In the culture where I grew up, there is a saying, money burns the pocket, which means that once someone has money, they feel a very urgent, itchy need or desire to spend it completely. Before, I thought that this kind of behavior was nothing but lack of financial education and self-discipline, but even after I became more educated and more disciplined, I still found myself in such situations. I often use a saying, money comes and money goes, in order to justify the lack of control over my finances. But one day it just struck me that my refusal to accept a lot of responsibility for my financial decisions can root in great financial insecurity and also ancestral trauma. The flashbacks of such trauma become very obvious in situations when one believes that once they have gotten some unexpected income, revenue, whatever, like money, they have to spend it completely because of the subconscious fear that it can be taken away at any moment. After the October Revolution, my maternal great-grandfather, a well-to-do merchant, was called a kulak and was forced to leave central Russia for western Siberia with just one cart, one horse, and his whole family. My paternal grandfather lost everything in Holocaust and Soviet labor camps, and my parents barely survived the 90s without any savings that were taken away by the government. On the one hand, all these family stories and experiences, the memory of which I bear inside, made me treat money less seriously. Every time I lose it unexpectedly, I try to focus on being thankful for what I have besides the money. But on the other hand, all those things breed not even lack, but fear of financial responsibility, and consequently the fear of having money overall. And thus, subconsciously, I prefer to spend the money right away before it's taken from me, or I try again very, very deeply, subconsciously, not to have excessive money at all. Again, this is a very special personal realization, and I'm not sure whether it's 100% true, and maybe you can relate to it in a way, even if you come from a completely different background. I live frugally because I know how to save on buying good quality food, clothes, and experiences. I've learned all that from my parents, but still I catch myself sometimes being too frugal overly worried about my spendings and very anxious every time when I have to spend more than I could. And now I can finally understand why I'm so triggered by YouTube videos titled like "Why I'm So Frugal" or "I Buy Nothing," because I still believe somehow deep inside that I always have to be too overly frugal. Here is the most recent personal example. I had to buy a special pharmaceutical care product, and in the pharmacy I had a very hard time choosing between several options that were priced differently, and in the end I went with the cheapest one that was also on sale. But when at the cash register I found out that in reality that item was at least 3 times more than I expected, my heart dropped. There was a mistake in the price tag, and my first thought was like, no, 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 I cannot buy it. There is a cheaper version. If there is a cheaper version, why should I get this? But then I almost laughed out loud at myself how ridiculous I was, because I could absolutely afford that self-care product. I could, because on that very day we spent more on simple groceries, while that thing would last for a couple of months at least. Toxic overfrugality creates constant anxiety that can result in a very harmful thought that you don't deserve something that is more expensive. And then subconsciously, the desire to own it grows and breeds insecurity and hyperfixation on materialism. The absence of balance makes the extremes flourish, and if now you go overboard with something, there are very high chances that sooner or later you will end up on a completely opposite end of the spectrum. It's very important to remember that frugality, and moreover excessive frugality, is not a virtue. It's not a trend. It's a vital necessity that one might experience for a certain period of their life, but that period doesn't have to last forever. Also, chasing the best deals and lowest prices, we often spend much more time and energy than we would if we chose a higher priced yet a more accessible option. And in the end, the lower price doesn't make a difference, because in reality the cost of getting that thing grows, because now you're paying not only with your money but with your time and over fixation on that particular thing. And this brings me to the next habit that is a very sensitive one, and I'm warning you to keep an open mind to the insights that I'm going to share with you. In my mother tongue, which is Russian, there is a very special word which equivalent I failed to find in English, and this word means something that one gets for free without any effort. It's the greatest free luck that should be celebrated and used to the full. The word is halyava. And it is supposed that everyone loves it, everyone needs it and wants it all the time. But this mindset of halyava is very dangerous, and I will try to explain why. The thing is that money is just a token, the simplest equivalent of exchange. And every time you take or use something created by others, you pay this way or another. When you get something for free, there's still an exchange, but you pay with your time, attention, mental or physical energy, with your data, your privacy, your moral capital, or even with your freedom. This exchange can be good or not so good, it just all depends on the transaction. So if you are trying hard to get as many things as you can for free without paying any money for that, you should maybe try to begin to notice with what you are actually paying. I've had quite a journey to learn this lesson the hard way, and on this channel, one of the first videos, I think I filmed it about 3 years ago, I even talk about how I try to get stuff for free, and now it's quite embarrassing for me, but back then my life was completely different and I've changed a lot since then. I'm not talking about situations when a person doesn't have any finances to buy this or that thing or service. No, I'm talking about stories that I've heard from people when they do have money to buy something, but when they use every opportunity not to pay for it, and thus turning it into some sort of an exciting game of treating or tricking the world. I never went to such an extreme, but I always had that special affection for halava in me. But what I noticed is that it created even a bigger scarcity, the feeling of scarcity inside that couldn't be filled with getting free stuff over and over again. But that scarcity void began to shrink once I've taken a conscious decision to transform it and began to appreciate and recognize the efforts of others by paying them, be it with money or my attention or service or anything. It's just mind-boggling to me how people value money and are doing everything not to spend it, but they are willing to give away their time and privacy and freedom just for the sake of not paying. In my parents' apartment, there was a small closet filled with stuff. There were clothes, different tools, and food. Two huge sacks, one filled with flour and one with sugar, three big shelves all packed with different salted and pickled vegetables and fruit and teas, grains, boxes of chocolate, and also spirits for future holidays. There were 4 of us in the family. Times were quite hard, but still my mother had to very regularly get rid of the food that went bad. She just had to stock up, because back then you either use your chance to get something once it's available in the store or on the market, or then you just won't be able to find it anywhere else. Now that my childhood is left far behind, I still struggle with the anxiety to stock up and save just in case. This anxiety is certainly not adding anything to my mental well-being or minimalist lifestyle. Overstocking suffocates me, and I know that many of you might say that this habit is actually financially good for you, but people are different, and what is good for one person is detrimental for another, which is my case. Spending money now in order to save it later rarely works for me, just as my experience shows. There's always a catch when you try to be tricky with your future and possible needs. And also, this habit comes from a hyper-controlling mindset that I'm also trying to transform right now. And yes, on this channel, I share very honestly about my personal journey. I haven't figured things out yet. I'm just in the process. growing up, I believed that one of the worst human sins was laziness. And that's why I thought that I had to work hard all the time in order just to justify the sole fact of my existence. And by working hard back then, I meant, of course, not having a job, but studying, and I studied like crazy. But later in my life, every time I got a new job or I managed to keep a job amidst huge dismissals, I was so thankful, overly thankful, because I perceived having a job as a privilege, but not as a basic human right. I felt like I owed so much to my employers, while in reality, I was just selling my time and my skills. It was a fair transaction, and that's it. And to compensate for all those exhausting efforts, I would follow a very common cultural tradition to celebrate. To celebrate monthly salary, every bonus, every vacation, which often resulted in quite unnecessary overspending. The more I worked, the more I spent, and the more I spent, the more I had to work in order to earn more. That was the circle that needed to be broken, and thankfully it happened finally. But even now, when sometimes I happen to earn more than I expect, I feel that need to spend more to justify or to excessively celebrate that incomings without just acknowledging that, yes, I deserve it. The transaction went well. Habits and mindsets are not just things cut in stone. One of the most beautiful features of a human mind is that we can change, transform, and choose directions for personal development. And it's important to use this feature to think, analyze, and explore why we do what we do, why we live the way we live, where our decisions come from, and where our fears or limitations hide. Because, as one of my favorite philosophers said, we get into the habit of living before acquiring the habit of thinking. Feel free to share in the comments your thoughts and experiences, whether any of the insights that I've shared resonate with you in any way, or you have something completely different to share. Let's have this exciting exchange in the comments. Thank you so much for your time and attention, dear friends, and as always, I'm sending huge thanks and gratitude to everyone who supports my work on Patreon and other tipping platforms, because thanks to you, this channel exists. And for now, be safe and keep your heart open, and I will see you soon. Пока-пока.